Hi there. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome here to the Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show. So we're starting a new mini series today. We did the 1950s one, had 7 artists. If you want to watch that, you can go back and watch the episodes for that. This series is going to be from the 1960s. So I've titled this The British Invasion, but we're not just going to be dealing with British bands here because that's a little lopsided. So I've picked out some bands that are obviously part of the British invasion. And I've also picked out some bands that are not part of that British invasion. But we're going to start with the British invasion first. So the band I'm going to start with are the Rolling Stones. Arguably, and at least in my own research, I've discovered, surprising enough to me, that these are probably the most popular band in history. Now, there's going to be a lot of arguments about that. And I'm not saying that it's exact, but I did a video some time ago where I went online and I picked 30 different sites, rock sites basically, and I avoided the progressive rock because that tends to be a bit of a narrow margin. There's 2 or 3 bands there that kind of dominate. So I didn't do that. I just picked random people that had sites on their top 10 or top 20 or top 30 rock bands of all time, and I gave like kind of a point system. And to my surprise, the Rolling Stones ended up on top. They didn't have the most number 1s or 2s, but they had the most top 5s for sure. And so, and I was told this when I was a kid. So my cousin was a big fan of the Rolling Stones, and he told me that, yeah, they're the world's biggest band, right? And at that time, I wasn't going to argue with them. But we're going to be talking about the Rolling Stones today. So the first thing about the Stones is that they are one of the British invasion bands that came here in the 1960s across the pond and invaded our countries and brought their music with them. So the Rolling Stones' general genre for me is a kind of a blues rock, hard rock, pop rock type thing. So they go from that blues rock sound right up through pop and rock all the way up to a little bit of hard rock on some of their stuff too. They actually did some stuff in the late 70s that was also kind of disco-y, you know. They're not afraid to experiment, the Stones. That's the one thing about them. So I've chosen so they've been active basically since 1962, and they're still active. They just released an album 3 years ago, and there's talks of another one this year as well. They have 24 UK released albums and 26 US released albums. So they had a couple albums that were released only in the US. If I was to say what I thought were the 5 biggest, most well-known tracks, you could have chose from about 12 or 14 different tracks. I tried to stick with the ones from the 60s since that's what we'll be talking about. I chose Satisfaction, Jumpin' Jack Flash, Get Off My Cloud, Under My Thumb, and Sympathy for a Devil. There are other tracks, obviously, that could fit in there. The Stones' problem isn't finding 5 tracks, it's narrowing it to 5 tracks. For a lot of bands, it's difficult to get that many number 1 top, most well-known songs. But for the Stones, it's not an issue at all. I did bring some albums to display that I think are among their best. Let It Bleed. I call this the Cake album. Sticky Fingers, one of their best, I think. It's got one of my favorite songs on here, Brown Sugar, which wasn't even mentioned there, but would easily have been, even though I think this album is a little bit later than that. I could be wrong, though. This has Bitch and Wild Horses and a few other songs on it as well. This one's my particular favorite, and the first one with Ronnie Wood, I believe. Or was he on Black and Blue? He might have been on Black and Blue, I'm not sure. Anyways, this has some of their best stuff. Miss You, Some Girls, Beast of Burden, Shattered. Yeah, really good. And the title track too, Some Girls. And this one, Exile on Main Street. I don't particularly like this album, and I'm not really even sure why. What it is about it. I think it's a little bit too heavy on the bluesy side for me. I'm just looking for it. Doesn't have a track list on it, but here it is. It's all covered with pictures of them. Exile on Main Street. And then this one from the 80s, although we're talking about the 70s. This one was out as my display one, Tattoo You. This is a kind of a leftover material album, but some really good leftover material. Other bands would love to have that as their front material. So the original members in this band consisted of Mick Jagger, Brian Jones, Keith Richards, Ian Stewart, Tony Chapman, and Dick Taylor. That was the original band that kind of performed together. And then within a short period of time, Bill Wyman replaced Dick Taylor, and Charlie Watts replaced Tony Chapman. And then a few years later, after Brian Jones died, he was replaced by Mick Taylor, and then Mick Taylor eventually was replaced by Ronnie Wood, and then you get a couple of the classic versions of this band together. My favorite album, of course, I already said, is Some Girls. And the reason this is my favorite album is because it's my first one. And that's generally what happens. My cousin was big into them, and so in the late 1970s, probably like 79, or maybe it was even 1980, I bought this album because it was their most recently released before the Emotional Rescue album came out. And I love this album. I still love it a lot. I don't know if it'll stay at the top of the pile because there's so many albums that I've been getting into by them that it probably will lose its spot eventually. They've sold 250 million albums, so that is a huge volume of albums to be sold. But they did have 24, 26 albums, so it's understandable. One of the great bands for releasing big hits, lots of big hits from them, stuff going on forever with them. They've had incidents in their history. It's a very notable history, an interesting history. And unlike some bands, you don't know much about them other than their music. But the Stones have been front page in a lot of ways throughout the 60s and 70s, even into the 80s, with the death of Brian Jones, mysterious circumstances under his death. Then you had the Hells Angels part where they were being security for the concert, and one of them stabbed a fan to death. Yeah, so they've had that. They've had fallouts between Keith and Mick in the 90s. I think it was the 90s, or maybe it was the late 80s. I think it was the late 80s, actually. But they always seem to persevere. They're the longest running band now out there, I believe, since 1962. I don't think anybody stayed together that long. I don't think they ever broke up. They had periods of time where they went without albums, but they toured and did stuff as well. They've had 4 Grammy Awards. Not that Grammys really matter much, nor does the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame really, but they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2004. They were ranked by Billboard as the greatest rock band of all time. And I think that probably applies to the Rolling Stone magazine, probably rated them that as well. So one of the great rock bands in history, a band that I like a lot. They're not they're not in my group 2 even. They're high up in my group 3. But I've got a ton of albums that I've gotten over from them recently, and I've only got about half of the albums they have. So I suspect by the time I get through all of their albums, they will be in my top, my group 2 for sure. Just a really good, solid rock and roll band with lots of interesting songs and tracks and interesting lyrics and guitar stuff and really good, catchy stuff. So that's my take today. The Rolling Stones had a large influence on a lot of bands going forward too. one of the most, if not the most successful band in history as far as being continuous and pumping out great stuff. Definitely one of them. Anyways, that's my choice for today on the British Invasion, this mini series that we will be running from the 1960s. We're going to be doing 8 episodes in total. I've already chosen all 8 of the artists. Half of them are from Britain, half of them are not. And we will be talking about them one a week. Next week, we'll be talking about the Kinks, another great British Invasion band. Maybe not thought of as being that great over here on this side of the pond, but they were huge in Great Britain. Definitely a competitor of the Stones and the Beatles and others. So that's what we'll be doing next week. Please hit the like and subscribe. If you want to make any comments about the Rolling Stones or their albums or their songs or their members or anything to do with them, you can put that in the comment section. I look forward to stuff like this. Is always good because people like the Stones have lots of fans who've followed them for years and know stuff about them that nobody else does. So anyways, look forward to hearing from you. Take care. Have yourself a good evening, good day, and goodbye from the Prog Monster.